That's what I thought. Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about fossils and the importance of fossils in our lives. I'm not sure if you are aware what are fossils, where do we find fossils and how do we categorize it. I really hope that today's conversation, especially we would be focusing on Shivalik, one of the richest fossil beds in Asia. With us today, Dr. Sonika would be joining, who is an archaeologist and paleontologist. She is also subject expert at Enroute Indian History. She will be the best person to help you guide, understand what is fossils. So if you have any questions related to that, it will be great. You can drop it in the comments and we'll pick up the questions related. So Dr. Sonika.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
I can. And mistakenly enough, I first joined from my own personal account and I was thinking to myself, why is not anyone live? And then I realized that I did not join from Instagram. Today we are going to, hi everyone, hi Morvi Aurora. So many people are joining. So let's start. I really hope that आज हम deconstruct करें लोगों के लिए कि fossil होता क्या है, क्योंकि लोगों को पता नहीं है fossil. I think it is just from the Mummy Returns and Indiana Jones that people have some idea about it. So the first question I think then Dr. Sonika is, firstly, what are fossils and why are fossils important?
So basically, fossils are preserved remains of animals from the distant past. Now, when I say distant past, it is it's a very long time ago. It is more than 40,000-50,000 years ago. Primarily, a fossil is an inorganic preserved remain. So fossils more or less are like stones. When the organic remains of the entire bone of the entire specimen gets replaced by inorganic sediments and inorganic minerals, that is the time when the fossil actually forms. Now, this is not the only type we have. Then we have something called as trace fossils. Like, for example, if animal died, or if like there was some event, volcanic event, so trees fell, so tree leaves got imprinted on soft soil, and then they got covered and then they got preserved. So those imprints are also considered to be fossil. Right. So inorganic remains of animals, oblique plants from the distant past are called as fossils.
So, Dr. Sonika, we do not categorize human skeletons and human remains in fossils. Only plants and animals are considered.
No, we do. We categorize hominid remains. We will use the word hominid because humans are very recent. Like Homo sapiens are very, very recent. So till now, if any Homo sapiens has died in the past, it is not yet sufficient time for him to fossilize or her to fossilize itself. So hominid remains are categorized under fossils. So fossils fall under the category of ecofacts. There are two types of archaeological evidence: artifacts and ecofacts. Ecofacts are things which give you an idea, like for example bones, fossils, then you have pollen, then seed remains. All these are ecofacts, ecological finds. And artifacts are like ceramics, then those shells, seals, steatite seals, and other such evidence in the archaeological finds.
So when you say that need to be preserved or they get preserved, what is the definition of preservation of fossils? What are some categories?
So for any organism to fossilize itself, or for anything to make to fossilize, a lot of ambient conditions have to be met. First of all, once the animal would die, it generally what happens in nature is it gets scavenged. So scavenging would mean that it is torn apart into pieces and then it has broken down completely. So for example, an animal dies and it gets embedded in tar, or it falls into the river and it gets embedded in soft mud, or it falls into the quicksand and it gets covered. So the first thing is that the animal has to get covered, and then slowly, and yes, it has to forego this process of scavenging. Slowly, steadily, then pressure forms on it. It is broken down. Then it is slowly, the mineral components are replaced by inorganic components, and that is how fossils are formed. Like that is why tree resin is an excellent source of fossilization. So we get honeybees, we get insects who have got trapped into the resin, and that resin has got preserved in the past. So that becomes a
Right.
fossil. Similarly, we have the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. This used to be a natural source of tar in prehistoric times, somewhere in Pleistocene. So animals, the herbivores, they went near that tar thinking it is water, and then they fell into it. Now seeing that herbivores are trapped, carnivores went for them and then they got trapped. So slowly,
Right.
steadily, animals got trapped and they got preserved. So today there's an
Oh,
entire
okay.
museum and research center near La Brea because of the excellent fossilization of animals. So these conditions have to be met. Only then a
Right.
fossil will be able to
I
form.
think Jurassic Park did show us those raisin, and I think the mosquito was preserved in
Yes,
it, and
yes,
that is
correct.
how. And
Yes,
they extract the blood, and then
yeah,
that's how they start, है ना? So that
yes.
was the starting. The second thing is what kind of data is generated from fossils. ठीक है, हम समझ गए कि these are some ideal conditions कि fossils होते क्या है, उनको बनाया कैसे जाता है, कि preservation कैसे होती है animals and plants की. अब क्वेश्चन ये आ जाता है कि अगर फॉसिल्स बन रहे हैं तो हमारे लिए वो इंफॉर्मेशन क्या प्रोवाइड करते हैं 21st सेंचुरी.
So first of all, fossils, if you study fossils, they tell you an idea about the animals in the past. So we can look at the evolutionary history. It helps us to reconstruct the phylogeny. So like for today, if we know how human evolution has happened from Lucy in Ethiopia, from that, Australopithecines to how we have reached to modern day humans, that timeline has been made only by studying fossils, hominid fossils. Secondly, what happens is when we look at fossils, we get an idea about the environment in the past. For example, today, places like, which are absolutely arid, like India in the peninsular region, at one point of time in the past had ostrich. But today we cannot imagine ostriches to be anywhere else except Africa. So ostrich fossils have proved that, okay, even in India, these animals are present. In the Shivalik ranges, we have hippo fossils coming up. So that area was a swampy area at one point of time. So studying fossils and the presence of fossils gives us the idea of the environment in the past. And
Right.
also like climate, certain presence of certain animals is an indication of, aridity, tropical, subtropical. So this also gives us an idea about how climate is changing. And
Right.
interestingly, some fossils are called as key fossils. So
हाँ.
this here we combine geostratigraphy with paleontology. So certain fossils are only found in certain layers at certain point, at a very specific point in time, and we know that point. So for example, if we are finding a fossil at a particular layer or a stratigraphy, we can
हाँ.
easily date it. So this becomes part of relative dating. So anything
हाँ.
below that, we know it is going to be older. So this is being done
Okay.
in Shivaliks, that this is the horizon at which, let's say, elephant is found at, let's say, 50, 60,000 years ago. Anything below that is older, because the elephant is not found above it or below it, but it is only found at that specific time. So
Okay.
they play a very specialized role to understand relative dating also. I mean, in dating
Okay.
segment.
So as you said, it provides us the data of geography, climate, and evolution, the three pointers. If we start studying the data of fossils, it also teaches us certain kind of animals, certain kind of species, when did they exist, when did they cease to exist. तो इसलिए fossil studies बहुत important हो जाती है हमें समझने के लिए. Then the other question then comes is कि India के अंदर Shivaliks, we are going to focus on Shivaliks today, and it is considered one of the richest fossil beds in Asia. तो question ये आता है A, where is Shivaliks, and B, why is it the richest fossil bed in India?
Okay, so Shivaliks is basically, they are the lower Himalayas. So Shivaliks, if we look at it, these are freshwater deposits. The Shivalik ranges, they are formed wherever fossils are found. These are freshwater deposits. And it is not that the fossils are found in the entire length. They are found in certain pockets. Now,
अच्छा.
the deposit the Shivalik deposit for fossils is around 7 meters thick. Roughly, we have dated it to around 18.3 to around 22 million years. So, whatever fossils we are finding, they are somewhere in this range. From Indus till Brahmaputra, the Shivalik, the lower Shivaliks we have, they are completely, running along this entire region. Now, to understand the stratigraphy and the presence of fossils, the Shivaliks have further been divided into upper, lower, and middle. Now, within these, there are subgroups. Now, these subgroups are based on the geology. So, the upper Shivaliks has got this group called as Tatrot and Pinjor. The middle has got this group called as Nagri and Hokpathan, and the lower group is Kamilial and Chinji. And so we generally have fossils in these beds. The Shivalik fossils primarily are all vertebrate fossils. So we are not going to get dinosaur fossils here. They are basically Plio and Pleistocene fossils.
Right.
The richest amongst them are in the upper Shivalik region, which the regions are Potwar Plateau.
If I'm not wrong, there's a museum over there, Shivalik Museum,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So why do they have the skeletons of dinosaurs over there then?
There is one stray find, but Shivaliks are known for Pleistocene fossils. Like the characteristic fauna has also been given. So the places where in Upper Shivaliks where we are finding fossils are Potwar Plateau, Pabi Hills, Jammu, Chandigarh also.
Achha.
And the fauna generally is ancient primitive elephants like Anancus, Elephas hypsodricus, Elephas planiforms, then stegodons, which was the core species of elephant. It is an extinct elephant. We don't have it anymore in the world. Then we had hippos, we had hexaprotodons, we had certain large apes, gigantic apes. Then we had deers, then even crocodile. Crocuta species was also there. Then we have Panthera and we had Felis. So these are vertebrate fauna of Pleistocene. So these were generally found in the Shivalik beds.
Right. Around what age did you mention, Dr. Sonika?
So from
how many years ago?
These sediments have been dated to around 18.3 to 22 million years ago. But then these fossils are much younger. They are not in millions of years. They are in thousands of years.
Okay.
The park that you were mentioning is the Suketi Fossil Park. It is in Sirmaur district. So again, it is showcasing Pleistocene vertebrate fossils, and they have those extinct models that they have made of certain animals, key finds, keystone species which have been found. So, and this is presently this is Asia's biggest fossil park. Yeah.
Oh, I see. And then you talk about Hathnora, hai na? Hathnora is the flora.
Yes, Hathnora
which is a. Please go ahead.
It is again a very important locality because this is the only locality in the Indian subcontinent from where a hominid find has been found. So in 1992, Arun Sonakio of GSI, he found a skull cap, and then subsequently he also found a clavicle and the ninth rib cage, not the ninth rib cage, the ninth piece of ninth rib. So these have been found from Hathnora. Now Hathnora is in central Narmada Valley. These are basically along the Narmada river. They are riverbeds. So the fossils here which have been found are rolled and embedded fossils which are in secondary context. What secondary context means is that the animal did not die there and get fossilized. The animal or the whatever hominid must have died somewhere, fell into the river, and then got deposited and somewhere then got embedded. So that is why we are finding pieces and stray finds in these beds. We don't find intact, complete creatures as one imagines. So that is why this is very important because till 90s, India was yielding a lot of stone tool technology. We have the Estulian culture in India, which is the oldest. A lot of stone tools are coming, but you were not finding any fossils. So that is why India was not being able to come onto the map of hominid evolution. But with this find, we are able to
What do you mean when you say hominid? Because for a lot of people, they won't understand what is hominid.
Hominids are all species of homos. Like we are Homo sapiens. Homo is a genus, and sapiens is a species. It means modern man. So all creatures or all beings which used to be under the Homo genus are called hominids. Today we are the only surviving member. But at one point of time, there were Homo neanderthalis, Heidelbergensis, Denisovans. We had Erectus. We had so many different species. There was a rich variety. But today we are the sole survivors. So when I say hominid, it encompasses all these ancient beings as well.
So for people who joined, please go on, Dr. Sonika.
So that is where this locality is very important because of this hominid find, the Hatnora skull. And unfortunately, there's a lot of debate because the find itself is not very, it's a very small piece, so we are not able to completely, categorize it. So there is always a debate going on. So some people say that, it is a archaic Homo sapiens. Somebody say that, it is a very advanced form of Homo erectus. So it is somewhere in between.
Right. So for people who joined a bit late, we were discussing about Hathnora, and we were talking about how in the central Narmada Valley, we find these stray findings, and it indicates towards the fossil of hominid in India. And that is why, and stray findings are those findings, as Dr. Sonika has pointed out, that the hominid may have died somewhere else, but it got traveled through the channel of Narmada and it fossilized over there. So it's very interesting find that we do. And before that, we were not finding any fossils of hominid. So this area becomes very important for us when it comes from a paleontology perspective. Someone in the comments also asked, how do we find and how do we calculate the aging of a fossil? So
how do we find and calculate
the aging of fossil? Yes.
Okay, so basically we have certain techniques like broadly right now we know the existence and extinctions of various animals. So if we find a fossil, the first thing that we do is we identify the species. Now for example, it is, let's say, an elephant species, Elephas Hysotrichus. Now I know this species lasted, it went extinct somewhere around let's say 60,000-70,000 years ago. So that is my upper limit. So I know the prevalent period of this species. So first thing we do is we identify what species it is, what animal it is. Then it can be the organic matter can be used in dating. Like over here, if possible, like if it is of a recent species, we can do carbon dating on it, but carbon dating beyond 40,000 years does not work. So then we go in for other dating methods like AMS, or we have other like multiple absolute dating methods which we employ. But first and foremost is identification and prevalence of the species. And the second part was, where do we find fossils?
So, no, not where do we find fossils, I think. But yes, please, I think you can answer this question definitely.
So, you like in archaeology, many excavations are planned excavations. We know exactly where sites are, how to go about it. Fossil finds are generally accidental discoveries and are stray finds, because firstly, for any animal to fossilize itself is a chance event. Then for it to get preserved is again it's a big if there's a very high possibility it gets destroyed. And then finding that particular place where it is embedded or it is lodged, that is again very difficult. So most of the fossil beds either are where animals have died in masses, or there has been certain volcanic activities, or there have been certain earthquake events. Otherwise, categorically to find fossils it is very difficult. Like we have these shivalik beds where animals got preserved. Then Narmada, we know.
I think volcanic eruptions can also be a good site for fossil finds.
Yes, volcanic eruptions, the lava, it preserves the tephra, that is the volcanic debris. It also preserves the animals which died. So these kinds of things are all possible. Like we have the Gaj beds in Pakistan which have got elephant fossils in them. So there are certain localities which have been found which have fossils, and going to these areas and looking around, carefully at the soil, you can find fossils, embedded here and there.
Right.
But you don't expect to find new localities on your own.
Yeah, you can't just go out like Pokemon hunt and try to find fossils for
Yes.
yourself. Uh, it requires years and years of research and study to map out the entire subcontinent and have a proper understanding of the evolution of so many things, geography itself, to understand where you can mark them. Another thing, then, what to do if you find a fossil? So
Firstly, if you find a
don't play
fossil,
with it.
please.
That will be an advice, right?
Yes.
Huh.
Firstly, what happens is when you find a fossil, people generally just want to pick up the fossil, but I would never advise that. Around the fossil, we have what we call as a matrix. That is the soil in which
Okay.
it is present. So one has to lift the entire fossil along with the matrix, because firstly, it will allow us to hold the fossil, and the matrix
Hmm.
itself, it gives us a lot of information. So
Wonderful.
never remove the fossil intact. Try to
Hmm.
remove it. Firstly, don't do this at all. But if you have to by some event, just hold the entire soil and then remove it.
Right.
And please inform your local ASI offices or museum or any other body which is working in that area, and surrender the find, because it is a key. These are all key finds which will help us build the history, build the evolution sequence in a particular area.
Right.
If people, the major problem in India is this, that people don't respect, that they're not able to respect these finds. For example, some of our professors were telling us a very interesting story. So I think this was back in 80s. So there's this place in Maharashtra, and my professor was working over there. So at night, suddenly all the villagers, they came running to him, and this is, there are demons coming out of the ground. So you please quickly
There's
come.
what coming out of the ground?
Demons, monsters.
Okay. Hmm.
So my professor quickly got ready and went to the site. And by the time he went, people were already destroying whatever they're finding. What they
Yeah.
found were rhinoceros fossils.
Oh,
Now, rhinoceros has got horns. So once
right.
the fossil came and revealed itself, the villagers, they saw horns, so they got scared,
Oh,
and they had
right.
never seen that animal in that area. They had
Right.
never seen that animal as such, so they thought there is some problem. So they
Oh.
destroyed the fossil.
But
So
I think it becomes really hard to educate the local. How will you educate the local citizens and the local villages? It's absolutely impossible to tell them about the fossils. And mostly these are the unidentified sites where fossils are found, not in the cityscape, because anyway it's in the concrete. So then it becomes a challenge as a paleontologist, I feel, and as an archaeologist to preserve the fossils and the artifacts without them getting damaged or corrupted. Another question then, Dr. Sonika, comes is, how does fossils helps us to understand human evolution tree?
okay, so what happens is that obviously our presently, if we date our Homo genus, we are around 2.3 million years. That is the oldest fossil that we have found, which we can directly
Hmm.
link to our present day species. So, in such
Hmm.
a million-year context, there is not going to be any organic find. You're not going to find any, cultural evidence. You're not going to find too much of, artifacts. You're not going to
Hmm.
find, too many, what do you call, very distinctive, artifacts. Okay, stone tools is one, but stone tool technology also remains persistent for a long time. For example,
Right.
we have the older one technology. Then we have the Estulian, which went on for many, many millions of years. So
Hmm.
within these also many species came and went. Now
Hmm.
fossils help us to identify distinct species of humans living at absolutely distinct time periods in very particular areas.
Hmm.
Like we have Homo florensiensis, which is an island species. Now nobody could have thought that the humans or a hominid living on an island will be different than what is a mainland species. So they allowed
Hmm.
us to understand and appreciate the diversity in the hominid
Hmm.
genus, and also to see how we have come. Because when we look at a fossil, we can also study them biologically. We can see, if you look at the skull, we can understand the cranium capacity. So the cranium capacity over the years has increased. Over the
Right.
species have increased. So we have,
Right.
and we are more high-brained. Then, secondly, the posture. Our posture,
Hmm.
how did it become straight? That also we can understand.
Is it straight?
Then,
I don't think so. Now in the present time,
now it is
it's
not.
definitely not
But
straight. Huh?
from, I should say, from quadrupedal gait to bipedal gait, how did we come to that? Then if we look at our teeth, again a fossil evidence, we can understand a dietary change. That from when did we become from herbivores to omnivores to carnivores to herbivores to what was the cycle of diet,
Right.
paleo diets. So all this
Yes.
information can be obtained from fossils.
Yeah. I think the last question I would love to ask you, Dr. Sonika, just tell us this one revelation that came from fossils, one study that helped us understand just by studying fossils, it completely changed the way we perceived history or the way we perceived our own evolution, be it the brain size, maybe something. Can you tell us any one interesting story? I really love the 80s monsters coming out of Maharashtrian village. So if you can
Okay.
tell us anything, yeah.
So stories as such, there I think many of in the field or in these stories keep
Yes.
coming up. But then an important one I think is the Dickinsonia find in Bhimbetka. So
Okay.
why I find it very interesting is that the auditorium cave in Bhimbetka, which are these rock, famous rock shelters, everybody knows
Huh.
about it. Everybody goes
Huh.
to see it. And in plain
Right.
sight, we had the oldest animal fossil. And for
Oh.
40 years, nobody saw it.
Oh. Oldest
So
animal fossil in India?
yes, in the world,
In the world.
yes. So
Baap re.
it is dated to 570 million years, and it is called as Dickinsonia. And basically, it is not exactly a fossil; it is a trace of the animal. So
Okay.
this find confirms that the Gondwana land, which is this peninsular India,
Yes.
had
Huh.
assembled itself and formed itself by 550 million years, and this cave complex is nearly as old.
Hmm.
Not with human presence, but yes, this complex is this old. Why I find it
Wow.
funny is because people went and they kept seeing the whole thing, but they never saw a
Yeah.
fossil on the wall.
It was fossil where it was in the on in buried in the earth. It was where was it in the plain
It
sight
was
in
on the wall. It was the trace on the wall.
trace on the wall. What does
Yeah.
trace on the wall mean, Dr. Sonika?
So basically, the animal would have died on top of this particular wall, and it got
Okay.
embedded. And because of the pressure, it left a trace behind, something like a stamp. It got stamped. So if you
Oh.
look at it, you can see the Dickinsonia imprint.
Oh, wonderful.
So
Wow.
this was the 2017 big discovery in the paleontology, in the field of
Huh.
paleontology in the world.
Wonderful. See, this is what we get to know that we had a fossil, trace of fossil of the oldest animal in the world in India at Bhimbetka, but for 40 years, nobody saw that trace, nobody saw the stamp.
Yeah.
And so I think what we can figure out from, and we figured out really interesting things. We also understood how if fossils are found, what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to carry it around like a rattle. You're supposed to carry it along with the sand, uh, which is called the matrix. And more importantly, you should actually go and inform any of the ASI superintendent or any officer. Don't try to be Indiana Jones for yourself, right? So thank you everyone for joining, and I think Dr. Sonika, this is one of the most interesting talks we had because fossils के बारे में इतनी गलत information है A. B, when it comes to Indian fossils, there's lack of knowledge, there's lack of talks. Maybe it is there in smaller circles जहाँ पे वो चल रहा है, but in the bigger circles, it's not easily accessible to talk about fossils. For people to understand कि होते ही क्या है, उनको नहीं पता आर्टिफैक्ट के बीच में डिफरेंस और फॉसिल के बीच में डिफरेंस. And these terms are just thrown at people: hominoids, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. But for people to deconstruct smaller terms and understand it is something very important. If you have any suggestions on what our other, like a small talk on Dig It Up should be for the next week, you can drop it in the comments or you can DMS us. And you can also hear this entire talk on Instagram and on YouTube. Uh, Thank you so much, Mr.
Pleasure.
Anil. I'm happy that you found this information very valuable. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Sonika. Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.